Hey, Lara here again. Got another little yoga sequence to share with you. This time we're going to do a little bit of navasana or boat pose and probably some malasana as well, or good old squat pose, one of my favorites. These two poses are really great for your body, really great for your mind if you ask me. And let's start on our backs. So, taking your fingertips outside your knees, if you're sitting on your shins, coming onto your seat. Scooching forward so you got lots of space behind you on your mat. Hands behind your thighs, make a C with your back and come down super, super slow. Remember to listen to your body throughout this yoga practice. If at any point something doesn't feel right, take a rest or do a little bit less. Feet walk towards you, picking up one foot and then the other. Hands come onto the shins. Pull those shins towards you. You might want to take the hands behind the thighs. Thighs push away from you, pull them back towards you equally. You can think neutral pelvis. If you bone sliding away from you, then go for it. That'll increase the amount of sensation. If this feels like enough stretch, stay right here. If you want some more, take those thighs. So the inner thighs are just outside your rib cage. Thighs push away from you. Hands pull those thighs towards you equally. And this might be more than enough sensation. If it is, stay right here. Thinking thighs and calves nice and active. You need more, lifting the shins. Eventually, as you lift the shins, you might arrive with the ankles directly over those knees, creating a nice straight shin here. If that's the case, and it feels available, you might take your hands to your calves, to the ankles, or perhaps the outer edges of your feet. So this is happy baby pose. If you've got your feet, you want to push those feet away from you, pull them towards you equally. Eventually, you want the inner edges of those feet to be parallel. If that's available, then you can think about the big toe and the baby toe bones being level, the inner and outer heel being level. Pushing into all four corners of those feet equally. Sometimes it's nice to stay still here. Sometimes it's nice to rock a little from side to side. I would go with whatever feels better for your body. Try to relax those shoulders away from your ears a little. Deep breaths. If you want more sensation, imagine you've got a little grape or a little egg underneath your sacrum and you're trying to squish it. And then from here, taking the hands back behind the thighs, take the knees a little wider if it's comfortable, and then think about straightening out those legs. And they might not straighten very much. They might straighten all the way. Do what feels good for you. Try to think about those neutral pelvis connections, taking those thighs away from you, maybe until those arms straighten. And then trying to keep that activity, pulling the legs back towards you a little bit. Might be more than enough to have the hands behind the thighs. If that's the case, stay here. If you need more, you can take the hands behind the calves, to the ankles, or again to the outer edges of your feet. Whatever is comfortable for you. Feet, thighs push away from you. Hands pull whichever area of the body you're holding on to back to you just as much. Lengthening from inner groins to inner knees, lengthening to inner ankles, outer ankles drawing into the outer knees drawing into those outer hips. 3 more breaths. And then taking the hands back to the thighs if you brought them beyond the thighs, and then slowly bend those knees if you straighten them, drawing those knees closer together. This time we're going to bring the soles of the feet to touch, either holding onto the outer thighs, the shins, the ankles, or perhaps interlacing the fingers over the baby toe edges of the feet. So no matter where you are, you want to push those feet away from you, those ankles away from you until your arms straighten, lengthening from those inner groins to those inner knees again, as much as feels comfortable for you. And then maybe you want to think about bending those elbows and drawing the feet towards you a little bit. That's up to you. It might feel nice to have the legs farther away from you. It might feel nice to draw them closer. Do what feels good for you today. It might be different day to day, week to week. Practice will fluctuate just as much as your mind, if not more. Keep your mind fixated on the breath. And then if your hands are on those feet, take your hands back to the ankles, the shins, eventually coming to the outer thighs, supporting those knees as you draw the knees together, and then bringing those feet to the floor. Rolling off to one side, pushing yourself up. And then next, we're going to come into a pose called creeper pose. My teacher calls it that because it creeps up on you. So you want your heels nice and close to your seat. Have the inner edges of those feet together, spread those toes, and you want your knees a little bit wider, wrapping the elbows around the knees, making a fist with the left hand, grabbing onto that fist with the right hand. Push into the feet, pull with the arms to lift the chest up, shoulders going back and down. It's like you're externally rotating the shoulders, pulling those collarbones apart a little bit. Keep pushing into those feet, squeezing the inner edges of those feet together, back, armpit lifting to front armpit, and it's like your mid-back is lifting towards your sternum. So often in this pose, the mid-back will try to round a little bit, so you want to think about that mid-back area, right about where the bra line sits, if you wear bras, lifting towards your chest. If you know you're quite flexible and you can bend into the back quite a bit here, you want to think a little bit of front ribs to back ribs, just to keep that spine nice and strong. Belly draws in and up, deep breaths. And then let's switch the grip of the hand, trying not to let anything else move except for those hands, swapping the grip, pulling those wrists towards you, pushing those knees out into the elbows, squeezing the elbows with the knees, so that if you were to let go, there'd be tons of activity there, right? Let's take 3 more breaths. Nice work. And then releasing the hands, take the knees together, the hands behind the thighs, lift your chest. So you want to try to keep that same back that we had in our previous pose. And then walk those toes towards you. And it might be quite intense here already, focusing on keeping the back nice and long and keeping those knees together. It might be quite challenging to keep the knees together. If that's the case, if you feel the knees, you can always take the feet and the knees a little bit apart as well. Focusing on maybe lifting those heels, maybe flexing one foot, and then the other. If it's available, feet and knees together, flexing both feet and hovering, pulling on those legs to reach those shoulders back gently. And then the tendency here, as you hold, if you fatigue, is to let that spine curl. So we want to try to resist that, lifting up into the chest, taking those shoulders back, kind of like you're leaning into an imaginary wall. And if you can keep that spine nice and long, and you need more of a challenge, like if this is already enough, don't worry about it, but if you need more, you can lift your shins so they're about parallel with the floor. That's a great option. You don't have to lift them that high, but if it feels right, go for it. Remember, if this happens to your back, bend those knees a little so you can lift up the chest. Use the toes, spread them wide. You might want to lose the hands for the last few breaths. Nice active fingers, active toes. Lift, lift, lift. And breathe. The most important ingredient by far. Nice. And then hands back to your thighs. Bend the knees, bring your feet to the floor. Now we'll have the soles of the feet together and the knees wide. Now if you notice this is tricky, and this is starting to happen to your pelvis, you're kind of tilting back into the pelvis, getting a bit of a posterior tilt there, then it's a great option to grab for a block or a book or whatever you have handy, and then have that block behind you, sit up onto your block, and then that'll give you a little bit more space for the spine. And then from here, you want those heels as close to you as this feels good for your knees, holding onto those ankles, or perhaps interlacing the fingers over the toes like we did previously, lifting the chest away from the legs. And this might be enough sensation. If it is, stay right here. If you need more, think about the elbows drawing towards you and then reaching straight back as they bend, keeping your chest lifted as you come forward. And you might need to stop partway down, like, oh, my back's rounded, lift into that chest and breathe. It might be available to come down farther. You want to think about your belly coming down, then your ribs, then eventually your chest, maybe your forehead. Remember, it doesn't matter which variation you take. Once you've found your depth, breathing deep, big inhales, full exhales. You may want to pull the soles of the feet apart a little bit to to get a little bit more of a groin stretch. But if you feel it in the knees, bring those feet back together. Nice work. Your next inhale, coming back up, bringing the soles of the feet together if you took them apart, and then hands to the outer knees. Let's give that one more go. So this time, hands start behind the thighs. We're going to give the option, I'll give you the option of extending the legs a little bit, making it more challenging if you need that challenge. If you don't worry about it. Focus on doing the same variation you did last time. So legs squeeze together, chest lifts, leaning back a little, maybe one toe touches, maybe the other toe touches, maybe both feet hover. You can hang out right here, or you might start to lift those shins. Maybe you'll try to straighten out the legs this time. If that feels comfortable and you can keep the lift in the chest, you might take a hand to the calf, hand to the other calf, continuing to lift that chest. Perhaps the hands could walk to your ankles. Remember, it's not necessary, it's just an option. Keep lifting the chest, keep breathing, gazing to your toes. Legs press away from you, arms pull them back towards you equally, no matter where you're at. Hands behind the thighs, maybe lifting those shins again, going with what feels good for you. And I love these poses because they strengthen the body so much. They're fantastic for strengthening the back, the core, the legs, the arms, pretty much everything. And in my opinion, they make all those other yoga poses just a little bit easier. And honestly, having a lot of core strength is just fantastic for everything. It makes all your activities in life just that much easier. You might want to lose the hands for the last few breaths, reach those fingers away from you, and breathe. And then if your hands are not on your legs, bring your hands to your thighs, bend those knees nice and slow, bring the soles of the feet to the floor. And then two options here. You can either keep the feet on the ground, grabbing for the wrists, the forearms, the elbows, whatever is comfortable for you, and then tucking the forehead towards the knees perhaps. Or if you'd like a little more challenge, you can keep those feet a little bit closer to you, heels lifted, grabbing for whatever is comfortable for you in the arms, and then lifting one or both feet, having those feet hover. You could point your toes, flex your feet, whatever is good for you, and then letting the back round, maybe bringing the forehead towards the knees, letting the spine relax, and breathing. Kind of like your little egg. And then curling back up if you tucked the gaze, bringing the feet to the floor if you lifted the feet, and then we'll do one more round. Because I've learned through a lot of practice and the method that my teacher usually does, that if you practice pose 3 times in a row, you get a lot more out of it. The third time, you end up getting even more of the alignments. It makes that much more sense in your body in terms of body awareness. It's just so good for you. Repetition is the key to understanding things often. So, starting with the chest lifting, shoulders rolling back and down, maybe lifting those feet, maybe lifting the shins, maybe straightening out the legs, maybe taking the hands to the calves, the ankles, etc. Chest lifting. Deep breaths. You can lose those hands, if you like, anywhere in between. Squeezing those legs together, use your fingers, use your toes. Sometimes it's nice to hug the inner arms and the outer edges of the legs to help you lift that chest a little bit more. And then hands back to the thighs, bend those knees all the way, straightening out one leg and then the other. And again, if this is tricky, if you're getting a tilt in that pelvis, the back is rounding, feel free to sit up on a block or a book in order to allow you to lift that chest up. And then from here, we're just going to do a straight-legged forward fold or Paschimottanasana. So if it's comfortable for your back, the legs are together. If your back's feeling a little sensitive, you can have your feet a little bit apart. That's a great option too. Fingertips next to the hips, trying to maintain that lift in the chest, thinking about that sacrum, lowest part of that spine, rooting back. And then lengthening that rib cage up away from the hips as you walk those fingertips away from you a little bit. This might be more than enough sensation, and you might be happy right here as well. But if it does feel available, then taking it a little bit farther forward. Fingertips or palms can push into the mat wherever it feels comfortable, as long as you're keeping that lift in the chest. Maybe the hands will come to the shins, to the ankles, or the outer edges of those feet, pulling on the feet or the hand or the lower legs to increase that lift in the chest. You might stay here, you might bend those elbows a little bit, pulling them apart, lifting them up, in order to relax that mid-back a little bit. And let the back of the neck be long. Take 3 more deep breaths. And then if you brought your hands farther down the legs, releasing the fingertips or the palms to the floor, walking those fingertips back to you, bending one knee and then the other. All right, next, we're going to do malasana, or a squat. Another pose that I think is fantastic. Highly recommend doing it every day if you have a chance. Even for a minute or two, makes all the difference. So, taking those feet a little bit wider than the hips, the knees and the toes have to go in the same direction for this one. It's really important. So, holding onto the shins to start, lifting into the chest. If this feels like enough already, then stay right here. If you need more, again, you can sit up on a block. Having that block behind you, sitting up onto that block. The feet might want to be a little bit farther away from you so the knee bend isn't too deep. You can hang out with the chest lifting, which is a great option. If you want a little bit more in those hips and it feels available to you, the fingertips can come in front of you. And then you might stay right here if this is how mobile you're feeling today. If it feels appropriate and comfortable, your fingertips might walk farther away from you, hugging those knees towards your shoulders, and really focusing on the big toe edges of those feet, not allowing that area of the foot to lift up, but really pushing it into the floor just as much as the outer edge of the foot. Hanging out there if that feels right. And if you can go a little bit further today, it feels appropriate. Hands can come behind you, lifting the seat, and then taking those hands forward, walking the fingertips away from you. Let your head be heavy. Or if you prefer, you can bring your palms together, push the arms into the legs, squeeze the upper arms with those legs, and lift into the chest. I find this, for me anyway, this is a bit more of a mid-back stretch and release, and a little bit more focus on those inner thighs. And if you're walking the fingertips away from you, at least for my body, it feels like more of a lower back release. I like to think about externally rotating those shoulders, fixing the gaze, and focusing on every breath. You can lift those toes if you like, spreading them wide. Maybe you can lift that chest one more time, broadening those collarbones. And then lowering those toes if they're lifted. Continuing to breathe in whichever variation of a squat you're in. If you need to extend those legs and come onto your seat at any point, that's always a good option to release those legs. If you'd like a little bit more of a challenge while we're here for our last few breaths, you might, and your heels are 100% resting on the floor. You are not on any height. Your fingertips can come to the floor in front of you. Lift the chest, push into the toes, belly draws in. Think about pulling those thigh bones or femur bones into your pelvis, and then maybe try to lift those heels a little bit. You might lift them a teensy bit, you might lift them a lot, trying to maintain your balance nice and slow. Lowering those heels just as slowly as you lifted. We'll do 2 more. Maybe you can have less pressure on those fingertips as you lift the second time. Lowering nice and slow with control. And I really like this for strengthening those ankles, the arches of those feet. If it felt quite comfortable, you didn't need much pressure on those fingertips, you might try 1 round without using those fingertips. Focusing on the chest lifting, the belly drawing in and up, using all those core muscles that you warmed up. Maybe lowering down just as slowly as you lifted. Good stuff. And then we're all going to come back out of our squat. If you're in the full squat, one hand coming behind you, other hand coming behind you, lowering onto your seat slowly. If you're on a block, we're moving that block nice and slow. And then we'll all extend our legs. One leg out, other leg out. You can be on a block or not for this one, depending on how you're feeling. Fingertips next to the hips or a little bit behind the hips to lift into the chest. You can be on your palms as well, flexing and pointing. Make sure you don't lift those heels. You want to keep those heels pushing into the floor so we don't hyperextend the knee. So over time, that can hurt the knee quite a bit. And I speak from experience, it takes a while and a lot of work to fix those knees. Better just take care of them and stabilize them as best you can. Let's point the toes in slow circles. Try to keep your knees as still as you can. And then change directions. Deep breaths. Fronts of those shoulders reaching back gently. Belly drawing in and up. And then flex those feet. Try to have the big toe and the baby toe mounds level. And then curl those toes like a crow, trying to hold on to a wire. Keep your toes curled as you point your feet. Keep your feet pointed as you flip just your toes back to you. 2 more. Flexing, curling, pointing, and flipping. Flexing, curling, pointing, and flipping. Nice work. Bend just the right knee. You can keep the right foot on its own side. Lift the chest. If this feels like enough already, then stay right here, taking your twist from here. If it feels comfortable and available, the right foot can come just outside the left knee, pushing into the sole of that foot. If you notice this foot can't connect to the floor fully, then take that foot back to its own side for the twist. Center that left heel in the floor, reaching those toes towards the ceiling, thighs pressed towards the floor or away from you, calves lift towards the shins. Like you're lifting those shins up into your fingertips. Left hand to the knee, right hand coming behind you, belly draws in as the chest lifts, and we twist towards the right. Try to think about that left hip drawing back slightly in order to keep those hips level. If you need to deepen the twist, you can wrap the elbow around the knee, or take your elbow outside the knee. Looking over your right shoulder, nice deep breaths, try to have those shoulders the same distance away from your ears. If you need more still, you can work that left palm towards your outer right hip. Let's take 3 more breaths. And then gently unwind back to face forward. Interlace the fingers, right thumb or forefinger on top, lift the chest, and right foot to its own side and extend. Bending the left knee when you're ready, keeping the left foot on its own side if you did on the other side. Otherwise, left foot just outside the right knee, push that left foot into the floor, center the right heel on the floor, right hand to the knee, left fingertips or palm coming behind you. Belly draws in and up, chest lifts. Going for whatever variation you did on the other side. Elbow can wrap around the knee if you need more, come outside the knee, or eventually the palm can work to the outer hip. Again, you want to make sure those hips are level. If you notice the left hip drawing back more than the right, draw that right hip back a little so that your sacrum and your lower back there is flat like a table. Keep that chest lifted and take your gaze to the left shoulder. Make sure you don't hyperextend that left knee if you're bendy. Your next inhale, unwind nice and slow. Interlace those fingers, left thumb on top this time. Chest lifts, shoulders relax. Left foot to your own side and extend. Nice work. So let's bend those knees, scooch a little bit forward. Have enough space behind you on your mat. Squeeze the legs together, make a C with the back. Come down as slow as you can. Push the feet into the floor. Try not to allow more than one disc, one vertebra to come down at a time. Once you're all the way onto the floor, releasing those arms alongside you, a few inches away from the body, palms face the ceiling, extending one leg and then the other, relaxing those toes out to the side. Think about the whole body being as still as it can be, resisting the urge to fidget or adjust, focusing on your breath, focusing on stillness. Slowly begin to deepen your breathing. Waking the body from the inside. Starting to wiggle your fingers and your toes, subtle movements. You might want to take a stretch with the arms overhead or in front of the chest. Letting those arms come down heavy. Maybe rocking your head a little. And then starting to bend the knees. Feet walking towards you. Rolling to one side. One hand coming in front of your chest to slowly push yourself up into any seated position that feels comfortable for you. Let's take 3 deep breaths together. Big inhale, shoulders to the ears. Out through the mouth. 2 more. And let us dedicate the merit of our practice to being mindful of the words of Socrates. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on breaking down the old, but on building the new. Thank you so much for sharing your yoga with me today. Namaste.